experience. And I felt if I tried to set up a software company, I wouldn't be able to recruit the workforce that I needed to be successful. And so I couldn't set up a successful software company. The educational infrastructure was not producing the human capital that would help me to be successful. And so I decided to do higher education because one of the things that I noticed talking with friends and family here is that if we took any problem and asked the question why we had that particular situation, if you ask the question why enough times, we always seem to settle on leadership. The people in charge were accepting the situation or were part of creating that situation. And those people were all the people who had an education after secondary. So these are people who had gone to college, who had gone to polytechnics. They were the people in charge of the country. And they constituted about only 5% of their age group. And so it seemed to me that if we could change how that 5% is educated to become problem solvers, then, over time, in 20, 30 years, we would change the country. And I felt that this is something that I could do, that I could, recruit people to help me do. And also, we would help produce the engineers and the programmers that would enable others to set up technology companies in Ghana.
Okay, thank you. So I would ask my colleague from Tanzania, who's also very passionate about education, to come in and ask you some questions, and then we'll go to the students. You can come here.
Yes, we'll come here. Come here.
Well, thank you, Edward, and thank you, Patrick, for the introduction of what you've done for Ghana. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, my question really is going to focus about education system. I mean, what is your opinion in terms of what Africa needs to do? Embracing technical education versus higher learning education, tertiary education. We've seen, I can give example of Tanzania. We've had many technical or vocational colleges that were transformed into universities. And most of our people are thinking that being a graduate, university graduate, would add value, but actually coming to China, I'm seeing in a lot of people who are working in the industry. Most of them are technical level education. They've never been to universities, but they've been to vocational colleges, and they're doing wonders in terms of production. Yeah, and again related to that, we have experienced back in Tanzania, as we are inviting investors from abroad, China included. One of the requirements is for any new investor is allowed to come in with 5 technical staff, and we have discovered that whenever Chinese are coming, they would bring technical staff without paper qualifications, university degrees, and so on. And that usually creates a problem between our authorities and the investor. The investor would say, really, it doesn't matter that this guy doesn't have a university qualification, but has the skills that are required for the kind of job that is expected to do. Now, this is the challenge in Tanzania, and I believe in most countries in Africa. So from your experience, you have worked for Microsoft, but also you've gone back home You've seen industries operating, and where should be our focus in terms of developing human resource that will enable our transformation, that will enable us to industrialize and leapfrog from where we are to where we want to go?
Well, the situation you describe in Tanzania is the same that is happening in Ghana. And I think that there are two drivers for that phenomenon, that we've changed the technical schools, the polytechnics, into universities. One is that the labor market here did not seem to value people coming out of polytechnics the way that labor markets elsewhere do. So for example, if you've had a polytechnic education and you're working as a technician at Boeing, building aircraft, you're quite a very highly paid person. But in Ghana, people coming out of polytechnics were sometimes starting with very low salaries. So that was, so there was a sense that they were being treated like second-class citizens, if you will. And the second driver was that the United Kingdom, which Ghana follows quite closely, changed its polytechnics into universities. And when the UK made that move, we started to see that conversation also in Ghana. I personally I suspect that the United Kingdom has regretted that decision that they made, because in any economy, you do need a lot of people who are technicians. If you're going to industrialize, you need a lot of people who are technicians, and you need a fewer number of people who are designers, if you will, if you're thinking, say, in engineering. And so what I hope will happen in Ghana is that the technical universities, which is what they're called now, will remain committed to hands-on training, that they don't sort of shift into a mode of just theoretical training, because we do need people who are hands-on in order to drive the economy forward.
So when Edward gave me your background and your story, my question was, why didn't he invest in technical universities, so that it can help many young Ghanaians, can prepare many young Ghanaians to be able to work in the industry, ICT and software?
I think that's a fair question. And if I was starting a new, tertiary institution in Ghana today, yeah, I would seriously consider doing a technical institution, partly because the government, the public polytechnics have all switched. Now, remember, when I was thinking about doing this, there were 3 main public universities. There was a 4th one that had just started in the north. So there were really 4 universities in Ghana. But there were a lot more polytechnics. I didn't sort of see, polytechnics as a thing that we didn't have enough of. And so I was trying to solve it. I was trying to solve a different problem.
Okay.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. So Gloria, you can come in with the questions from the students. Then we'll come back again for more questions from the ambassadors and later from Professor Boateng.
Okay, thank you very much, Echi. Before Honorable Gloria comes in, we have also in our midst a professor from Nottingham University, Limbo Campus, Professor Nana Kwame Kufuor. And we have the president of Global Union of Ghana Scholars, that is Mr. Lord McMensa, also in our mix. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Vice President. So continuing with the questions, I just want to ask you a question about, go back to how HE started and ask you a little bit about your family, your parents, your siblings, and how they have impacted you.
Okay, so I grew up in quite a large family. My parents, my father, my mother, they had 4 kids, but we always had cousins who lived with us. So when I was growing up, there were always at least 7 children in the house. So there were the 4 children plus a cousin who was adopted at infancy. So 5 of us, plus always 2 or 3 other cousins living with us. My father was an engineer. My mother was a nurse. My father started his career working Ghana Railroads and then eventually the State Construction Corporation in Accra. My mother was a nurse first at, I think it was at the mines, Takwa Mines, and then Meridian Hotel. And then she left nursing to be a trader. So she had a shop in Kaneshi Market. My siblings and I went to school. So my siblings went to Christ the King. My cousin and I went to Association. And then we went to, high school in Achimota, St. Peter's, St. Mary's, St. Rose's. This is where my siblings went. And I would say that my father had a big influence in my eventual decision to be an engineer. Because he was an engineer, I kind of sometimes would visit his workplace and be around the machines that they were working with, get the catalogs of the machines that he was working with. One of my closest friends his father was a pilot at Ghana Airways, so I was very interested in aviation because of that. And for a while, I entertained the idea of trying to become an astronaut. Changed my mind when I realized that to be an astronaut, and to be an astronaut at the time, you had to be a US citizen or a citizen of the Soviet Union, because there was sort of high security to go work at NASA. And so I switched back to engineering as my focus.
Okay. And could you also tell us why you chose to, go to the US to further your education instead of attending any of the other universities in Ghana at the time?
So there are 2 reasons. The first is that, as I said, I got very interested in engineering. I was very interested in 2 phenomena that were happening. The emergence of fiber optic communications. So for the first time in the 80s, telephone communications were happening using light instead of electrons in a copper wire. And I was really fascinated by that. I read all about that as I could. And that had emerged in the United States. And I was also really fascinated by the US space program and the development of the space shuttle. And so I decided that the country that had the most advanced engineering was the United States. The other one was Germany, because they build cool machines as well. But I didn't know German, and I spoke English, so that's why I wanted to go to the United States. The reason for looking outside of Ghana is that the second reason was that there was turmoil happening in Ghana at the time. So late 70s, early 80s, we had a series of military governments. There was a revolution. There was a lot of student unrest on the university campuses. and universities were often closed in Ghana. In fact, there was one time they were closed for a whole year. And so there was a backlog to go into university, which is why we had to do national service for a year before going to university. And if I could avoid going to a place where there was a risk of campuses being shut down because of student unrest, that seemed like a good idea. So that's really what drove me to look outside.
Wow, I didn't know that about the history of universities in Ghana. It's pretty interesting. I will take you back to your time at Microsoft and ask, how was it like when you were there? Did you get the opportunity to meet Bill Gates? Were there other Africans or people you could say, okay, this person looks like me because of the color of their skin or something like that? How was it when you were there?
So when I got to Microsoft, a couple of things that struck me. The first thing was that it was a very young company. I joined when I was about 23 or 24. A lot of employees were between the ages of 20 and 30. Bill Gates was in his 30s and he was one of the older guys. So it was a very young company, and we were developing software and we were doing transactions with much older people from IBM. So like if you were in a meeting with IBM, it would be 40 and 50-year-olds on the IBM side, and the Microsoft side would be a bunch of kids, 20-year-olds. I mean, we didn't see ourselves as kids at the time. Now I look back and I think, boy, we were kids. We're young adults. So that was the first thing that struck me. The second thing was that there was a lot of energy and a lot of excitement about what we were doing, and it was a lot of work. In fact, I remember one of the first conversations I had with my boss, my manager. The first day I got to work, my manager asked me, "Hey, so Patrick, where do you live?" And I told him where my apartment was, and he said, "No, that's not what I meant. I meant, where's your office?" And so I told him where my office was, and actually I lived in my office. I mean, I got up in the morning, I took a shower, went to work, I had breakfast at work, worked, lunch, work, dinner, work, go home, crash, fall asleep, wake up the next morning, repeat. This was our life, is we spent most of our waking hours at the office. But we were super excited about what we were doing. I met Bill Gates once when I first joined, and he asked me what I was working on, and at the time I was working on a very technical specification that helped Windows systems sort of interface with hardware. And I was working in the business systems division, and most people in that division didn't understand what I was working on. And I remember telling Bill about it and not expecting him to know or understand what I was working on, because it was so sort of, as we called it, deep in the guts of the plumbing of the operating system. And he knew exactly what I was working on, and he started to ask me all these questions. I was really surprised that the CEO knew so much about something that many people, even in my division, didn't understand. So he was very impressive that way, and he just kind of made it his business to know everything, and he seemed to have this photographic memory. He never forgot things. So that was what it was like at Microsoft. There were not a lot of Africans, not a lot of Black people. So there's a very small group of Blacks at the time. We all knew each other. and we made it a point to hang out with each other and talk from time to time.
Great. So how did your time there prepare you for the future?
Well, Microsoft, I think, has been really important to the work that I'm doing now in two significant ways, right? So the first is that the network that I built at Microsoft has been really invaluable to the work that I'm doing at Ashesi. Many of our major donors to Ashesi are Microsoft employees or former Microsoft employees. The money that I earned at the company, my wife and I opened a foundation in Seattle. We were the first donors into that foundation, and we went to our colleagues and asked them if they would donate as well. And so financially, it was great that I was at Microsoft when I was. The second thing that it's done to help is, Microsoft is a knowledge company in the sense that, the value of the company is all about intellectual capital. It's all about human capital. The value of Microsoft is not in its buildings or the computers that it runs. It is in the minds of people. And that's the same in a university. The value of a university is in the knowledge of the people who work there. So having the experience of working in a knowledge industry has been very useful to me. I've been able to, hire professors, people who are very knowledgeable in some very specific area that I may not have as deep a knowledge as they do. But having worked in an environment that was like that in Seattle, I'm able to manage a highly, how shall I say, knowledge-based workforce at the university. And then it's just also just the sheer, hard work, smart decision-making, learning to work in a team effectively, and knowing what a good team looks like and what a bad team looks like. That has also all been very useful to me.
Wow. Since you mentioned Ashesi, I would like to ask a question about that. So why that name? What exactly does it mean? And what is the story of Ashesi University?
Ashesi is the Fanti word for beginning. And the reason I chose that name was, when I quit Microsoft, I didn't immediately start working on the university. When I quit Microsoft, I went to business school to understand how organizations work before I would try to set up an organization of my own. And while I was at business school, the .com revolution was happening, and people at Microsoft had asked me if I would come back. People at companies in Silicon Valley had tried to recruit me, and it was somewhat tempting. I was also sometimes waking up and wondering, have I made the right decision leaving this industry? And I was scared. And then one day I stumbled upon the words of Goethe, a German playwright, that said, whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now. And so I typed up those words and I put them on my mirror so that every morning when I brushed my teeth and shaved, I would read those words. And I also put them as a background on my computer screen. So I was always reading these words, and there came a time when I decided I'm really going to do this. I'm not I had turned down an invitation to return to Microsoft. I turned down an invitation from a company in Silicon Valley. And I said to one of my classmates who I recruited to be co-founder with me, I said, you know, I'm really doing this. Let's call, this is the beginning. Let's call the university the beginning, but let's use an African word. We considered using a Swahili word for beginning. We eventually decided we would do a Ghanaian word, a Fanti word. My grandmother's Fanti. And so that's how the name came about. And my co-founder also liked the idea that having a name that meant beginning would remind future managers and future leaders of Ashesi that they should treat every day as a new beginning, every year as a new beginning, and never rest on their laurels.
At this point, I would invite Honorable Ebenezer to come in with some more questions from his side.
Thank you very much, Gloria. And once again, good evening, China, and good afternoon, Ghana, to Dr. Gyimah. We would like to know more about Ashesi. At the initial stage, how did you begin knowing and having the conception, choosing the name beginning? Want to know from grassroots, your first place of starting the whole university. Where did you begin from?
Okay. So the first thing I did, as I mentioned earlier to Gloria, is that I set up a foundation in the United States, donated some of my own money to it, asked others to donate to it. And we started to raise the funding necessary to start the university. We had done a feasibility study and a business plan for the university when I was in business school. And so once we had raised $1 million or so, we started to execute the business plan for the university. And the execution of the plan was, you know, building the team, developing curriculum. So I recruited 25 professors in the US to help me with curriculum design. We gave them feedback from the feasibility study we had done in Ghana, feedback from corporate Ghana, feedback from students and parents, and sort of said, look, use this as a guide for designing the curriculum because we want it to be relevant to Ghana. And then we went through the process of finding space. We rented, you know, a small building in Accra as our first space. And we just sort of did it one step at a time. So I think by the time we started operations, we had raised $2 million. And our goal was to raise $15 million to execute the full plan of developing a campus and growing to about 400 students. So that's really how we started. We started quite small. The first couple of years were very, very difficult. We almost ran out of cash in our second year. I would say that our first 2 years, we never had more than 2 months worth of cash at hand. So I was constantly raising money, and fundraising was very difficult for a couple of reasons. One was the dot-com bubble had burst, but also in 2001, 9/11 happened in September 2001, which was a major distraction to everybody, and sort of a shock to, you know, to the markets, the stock markets and all of that. And so we sort of limped along with, you know, we had raised money, we had spent a lot of money buying computers, we had used a lot of money to fund scholarships for students. And in our second year, there was a month when we came within 2 weeks of running out of cash. And that was a very scary moment. you know, I remember calling a friend in Chicago and saying to her that, you know, I'm in trouble. I need money just to keep the lights on. And she asked me how much did I need, and I told her how much I needed for the next month or so, the next month or two, and she agreed and sent the money. And then I just kept working the fundraising to get the funding in place. But the good thing about that year of crisis, and you know, that 1 month when we came within 2 weeks of running out of cash, my executive team didn't get paid that month. It was December. But we paid everybody else. We made sure everybody else was paid. It's just the senior management team was not paid. And we didn't get paid until we had got the university back on firmer footing in a couple of months or so. It was a really good experience. I think it's a good experience for any CEO to have once. It's not an experience that I want to have more than once. But it sort of really focused us on what is important and what is not. And so it caused us to really decide what are the most important high priority things to do, what are the things that we needed to postpone or not do. We cut out all unnecessary expenses. And I also, during that period, called a meeting with all my staff, and I told them we were in danger of running into financial distress and asked for their input on how we got out of it. And so it became a team effort in solving the problem. So that's what it was like getting started. That's, you know, and that third year, I changed my fundraising strategy. You know, I'd stopped trying to raise little bits of money from lots of people. And we changed the strategy to say, let's find 3 people that are going to fund us for the next 4 years. And what that meant was I only talked with people who could be one of 3. We ended up not with 3 people funding a 4-year expense, but we ended up with 7 people, 7 families that committed to fund the 4 years of Ashesi's operations until we got to operating break-even, financial sustainability. And then that sort of made a big difference to us in really focusing on executing the educational side of the project. And I wasn't spending as much time after that doing fundraising.
Oh, thank you very much. Having come this far means you've met a few challenges apart from the cash issue that you've stated right now. Looking at structural challenges or political challenges, can you tell us very difficult or a few of these challenges as students that we can learn from you and how you resolve these challenges as an entrepreneur?
So, you know, as an entrepreneur, you know, if you're trying to build something new, it's probably because you've seen a gap in the market that you're trying to fill, or a gap in society that you're trying to fill. And that gap is there usually because it's difficult to fill, right? If it was easy, somebody would have done it already. And so when you're starting, you're already starting with a challenge of a gap that you're trying to fill. You're trying to change it, you're questioning the status quo, or you're trying to change the status quo. And there are going to be people who think that the status quo is just fine, and who may even feel threatened by what you're doing, and who are going to react. In our case, you know, there were people, you know, Ashesi's academic model, the curriculum was very different than what the status quo was in Ghana. And somehow we needed to convince the accreditation board to allow us to implement this new curriculum. And the accreditation board is really driven by professors from universities that had a very different structure. And so convincing them was not easy. But the way that we got about it is to be patient, to be persistent in why we wanted to do what we wanted to do, to show them evidence from other countries, and eventually to get them to agree and sort of tell them that, look, if you let us do this and it doesn't work, we will change. So giving them some comfort that we're not just being reckless and letting them agree for us to do this. Some other challenges, I sort of talked about my difficulty when I was initially trying to think of starting a software company, that, the issues with the human capital that I might hire. Well, starting a university faces the same challenges, right? So it's not as if you're starting a computer science program, there are lots of people who have been trained with master's and PhD programs in computer science in Ghana. There hadn't been. In fact, none of the universities had master's graduate programs, postgraduate programs in computer science. And so we had to be hiring people from outside, people who had gone and done their postgraduate outside Ghana, somehow convince them to come home. And they're going to have questions around, well, if I come back, will I still be able to do the same level of work that I was doing in the UK or the US? And you sort of had to navigate all of that. They might have questions around economically, how will their lives be when they return home? So you have to sort of address that. So there are lots of challenges like that that we had to overcome.
Oh, thank you. I'm merging two questions now. It is said that graduates from Ashesi University get employment easily in Ghana, and even those who have not graduated sometimes.
Ebenezer, you're breaking up.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, okay, I can hear you now.
Okay, I'm saying, we all know, I'm a Ghanaian, that graduates from Ashesi University get employment easily in Ghana. Even sometimes before they even graduate, they get appointment. So the question is, what's your secret? What has been your vision? What are you doing different from the other universities that is giving upper hand to your students?
Okay, so first of all, I would say that I wouldn't call it easy. I don't think they get these jobs easily. They have to work hard for it. And we have to remind students all the time that you actually have to work hard. Now, in terms of, you're right that Ashesi students do get placed in industry when they graduate. There are times when they get job offers before they graduate. Sometimes companies want them to quit university and start working with them right away, and we have to convince them to wait until they finish their degrees before they go take that job. The reason why that is happening is, as we designed our curriculum, we involved corporate Ghana. So every program that we design, we bring people from industry and government to the table. We listen to their advice on what are the gaps that need to be filled, what are the things that we need to make sure that students have when they graduate. And we build that into the curriculum. The second thing is that we try to make the academic program very practical. So they're solving real world problems. They're doing projects that are sort of presented to us from industry. They're going off and doing internships in industry when we go on long vacation. And so all of that work experience and hands-on experience combines with the fact that the curriculum was designed in the first place to be what industry needs, to actually producing graduates that are very highly valued in corporate Ghana or corporate Africa. But it's not easy, it takes hard work.
Thank you. In following up on that, where do you see Ashesi University in the next 20 years? And what role do you want to play in the Ghanaian economy?
So if you look at the mission statement of Ashesi, we talk about educating leaders, we talk about educating African leaders. We don't talk about Ghanaian leaders, we talk about Africa. And that is intentional. Ashesi's vision very much, and actually we didn't even only talk about African leaders, we talk about educating leaders in Africa. So what we would like to see happen, in the next 20 years, I would want Ashesi to be very clearly recognized as a great African university where there are students, faculty from all over the continent, administrators from all over the continent working at Ashesi, and a great African university that is so good that some kid in New York or San Francisco is trying to decide what their first choice school is, and Ashesi is on that list. So it has to be a university that is sort of operating at the level of any great university anywhere. So that is the standard that we are striving for. And we think that it's very important to have that outlook, because the world of 50 years from now, 100 years from now, is going to be very interconnected. And if Africa is going to be successful in the world, then all our institutions need to be operating at the level that is sort of among the highest in the world. And our students and our faculty and our university communities must be fluent about connecting with others in the world. And we're working systematically towards achieving this vision. So, the first couple of steps we've taken is we've been recruiting very intentionally from outside Ghana. So currently, a little less than 20% of our students are not Ghanaian citizens. They come from other countries, from West Africa, of course, from East Africa, from Southern Africa. We have just a few from Central Africa, and we don't have any from Northern Africa yet. But we very much want to be Pan-African in the student body. We have started to negotiate student exchange programs with universities in North America and Europe, so that their students come to Ashesi for a semester. Our students go to their institutions for a semester. And we will expand that program to include Asia and other regions of the world, because that intercultural fluency is going to be important for the success of Africa and African institutions.
Thank you very much. At this point, we would like to take some more questions from our honorable ambassadors who are in our midst. Honorable Edward Boateng. His Excellency. I think your mic is muted. Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Patrick. Well muted. My colleague from Benin would like to ask you a few questions. But before Ambassador Simon comes in, you are talking about building a great African university, but all your exchange programs are with North American and UK institutions, as you just said. Why not other African universities?
We are talking with other African universities. And so, yes, we're talking with a couple of African universities, especially in Francophone, to see if we can get student exchanges for them. And we've also started a project we call the Education Collaborative that's been running for about, it's been running for about 3 years now. And what we do is once a year, we bring faculty and administrators, senior administrators from universities across the continent together. We've been hosting them at Ashesi. In the future, moving forward, we see this as something that's going to be hosted in other universities as well. And we've raised funding actually to support this. So we will be looking for partners in East Africa, partners in Southern Africa, that will become the hosts for this collaborative workshops at their institutions. So we're very, very keen on building strong interconnectivity between African universities.
So we are privileged today to have 3 senior African ambassadors with us. What would be your message to them? Because I would have wished that you started your exchange program with African universities and not North American or European, because it's still perpetuating the stereotype. So what would be your message to them so that we can fast track this part of the discussion and help you?
Well, I think, I mean, it's not just a message to the ambassadors. I think it's a message to all of us really as Africans that we should pay a little more attention to each other. And, you know, the reality, and this is very unfortunate, Ambassador Boateng, it's very unfortunate that I have to say this, but the reality is it is easier in some cases to find a university in America that wants to have an exchange partnership with the Ashesi than to find a university even in Ghana that wants to have a partnership with the Ashesi. And I think we need to sort of change our mindset to value what we have and what we can offer to each other. I'm very hopeful that the Education Collaborative is going to start to change that because the faculty and administrators who have come to Ashesi for those workshops have really loved it. 95% of them want to continue with it. And that collaborative is growing. And so to me, that is really the pathway. I think the faculty and the administrators of the various institutions need to get comfortable with each other and want to work with each other. And then we can start the student exchanges.
Thank you very much. So Ambassador Simon will come in. After that, we'll take 2 questions from Her Excellency Isabella.
Dr. Patrick, congratulations. I'm really impressed by what you are doing. And congratulations, I'm really impressed. I have one comment and one question. My comment is, I really appreciate the vision of the university to make it African university, because we need to break some barriers. We need to break the barriers that our colonialism raised for us, and we need to break that. And then that is what we are showing here. We have ambassadors from Ghana and Tanzania who are English-speaking countries, from Benin is French-speaking countries, and Sao Tome who is Portuguese. Then we are bringing that barriers here. My question now is, what is the impact of your university on the public universities in Ghana? Because you mentioned the status quo that was existing before you started. What is the relationship between your university and the public universities? And what is the impact that you are seeing so far?
Well, one of the things that I think has changed in Ghana because of the work that Ishesi is doing is that the public universities are now talking a lot more about focusing on critical thinking as one of the key goals, right? So before Ishesi came along, a lot of the education was just rote memorization. And we came along and said, look, there needs to be more focus on problem solving, on critical thinking, of giving students flexibility to think in lateral ways, and to understand and synthesize information rather than just repeating information back. And we're starting to see some of that happening. Another thing that has changed is that, you know, when Ishesi was starting, as I said, computer science education was something that was done on paper. Now, you go to any universities and they have, you know, computer labs and students are getting a hands-on experience. And the third thing, change that happened was that the salaries of at public universities have changed quite significantly since Ishesi started, and we had a role to play with that. We don't overstay that role. But when we were starting, a professor at a public university was earning about $100 a month, and you know, this is quite a low salary. And when the salaries are that low, you're going to have a brain drain. I mean, it's just you're literally asking people to leave. And I remember when we were starting, we started with salaries that were $1,000 a month. And you know, one of the vice chancellors at one of the public universities told me, you know, Patrick, you're making a mistake because this is too high, and you're hiring the same caliber of people that we do anyway. And I said to him, no, actually, you're making the mistake because your salaries are too low and it's going to destroy the profession in Ghana. So about 3 years after we started, the salaries at the public universities had matched us. And it was just in 3 years. And one of the things that was happening is as the professors are sort of negotiating with, you know, the government and, you know, talking with the Labor Commission, they check whether the salaries at the private universities, they check what the salaries are at Ishesi. And that sort of resets what they think is a reasonable salary to be negotiating with the professors at the public universities. And as this has happened, we now see more people who are interested in becoming lecturers and professors. We see more students who are interested in pursuing PhDs and getting into the profession. I should say that the salaries now are even higher than $2,000 a month. And I think that the private university system and Ishesi had a role to play in that. And we've sort of helped stabilize a profession that was in a lot of trouble because people were leaving the continent to seek better paid positions elsewhere.
Okay, I think you have to speak again.
Yes, okay.
All right, thank you. Sorry, we're all muted, so Patrick, you can speak.
Yes, yes, Patrick. Dr. Patrick, congratulations. we are available. We'll be in contact with Ambassador Boateng. If you need anything from us here, we are available to push to make your vision go globally around the continent and be more successful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We'll take the next question from Her Excellency Isabella and then Professor Boateng.
Today is it's better to go there. Hello everyone, can you hear me?
Can you hear her, please? You come here.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm glad to join this discussion about education. So thank you, Ambassador Edward, and congratulations, Mr. Patrick, for this very good work in Ghana. I think the experience is for all of us. So the education today is a very important question, and the people and the government realize we need to improve and make more and more young people in the school. So, but when they finish the high school and the university, they go back to home. But the reality during the university and the country is so different. And then sometimes they block. So in your view, in your experience, how they can make the management of this situation, what they study and the reality they find is the first question. The second question is, when we listen about the leadership, I think a lot of people think in political leadership, but we have a lot leadership, and then how our system in Africa can help the young people to develop the leadership by themselves, and don't wait for the government and the public service to build something by themselves, but they can join about this intervention, this necessity.
Necessity, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Isabella is also a teacher. I mean, that's how she started her career. And one of the female trailblazers in Sao Tome. She's been a mayor, advisor to the president, and the first ambassador of Sao Tome and Principe to the People's Republic of China.
Thank you, Edward.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you. Congratulations. And thank you for the questions. So you're right that, you know, when you study overseas or study in another economy or another cultural setting, and then come back home, you often will encounter a very different context than what you were studying in, and it sometimes is very difficult to navigate, you know, how things work at home versus how it was when you were studying overseas. And I think that it is very important. I can share what my approach has been, and I think this approach has worked for me. First of all, it's very important to understand that, you know, change doesn't happen overnight. And so if you return and you're expecting change to happen overnight, you can get very frustrated. And so it's really a good idea to be patient and really see this new environment as a new challenge that you must learn and that you must navigate. And if you take that approach, that this is just another problem to be solved, and it will be solved over time, that can give you some strength to actually get through it. The second thing is when you return home, it is quite important to plug into the networks that you had before you left. So in my case, reconnecting with family, reconnecting with former colleagues from high school, and getting their advice on how to navigate here was very important. It is very different being a student in Ghana than working in Ghana. And I had only been a student in Ghana until I left. So I didn't really understand what it was like to actually work here. And it was important that I reconnect with people who understood that and get their advice. I was building a new institution. So I wasn't joining an institution, I was creating an institution. And one of the ways to make sure that I had the right advice was to set up an advisory board here, to set up a board of directors here, and have people who are accomplished in Ghana. In other words, they've been able to successfully navigate Ghana, be on those boards, and take their advice on how I should proceed. And then finally, it's good to have some mentors. You know, when I returned, I was, I think, in my mid-30s, relatively young, and I got some mentors, not just one person, but a couple of people that I would seek advice from in different aspects. And so this is another recommendation that I would make.
So thank you. Congratulations one more time for all things you do now. And I wish all the best. And I hope to see you next time. Congratulations.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
She would like to see you in Sao Tome.
Okay.
In a Sashi satellite. So there's another question from here on behalf of Her Excellency Christine, the wife of the Benin ambassador. She would like to know the ratio of the female to male population at Asashi and how long you've been going. How old is Asashi, right? Yeah. And the male to female population.
Okay. Ashesi is...
and also staff, right? Staff and students.
Okay, all right. So the female population, the student body is about 48%. So almost a 1-to-1 ratio between male and female in the student body. And it's similar for the staff. Overall in the staff, it's about 50-50. The faculty, so that's the administrative staff. On my executive team, it's currently 60% women on the executive team. On the board, it's about, I think, 55% women on the board. On the faculty is where I think we have about 40% women on the faculty. So we do pay attention to gender balance, and we try to recruit accordingly across all parts of the university to make sure that we have good gender balance.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll take the question from Professor Douglas Boatin, and then we'll go back to the students.
So maybe he's muted.
Yeah, Honorable Nana, you can go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Mr. Eboa.
Okay, 1 second. Before you come in, Her Excellency Christine had another question, which I forgot. Is the use of language. We had a dinner discussion this evening, and I think when we had the Deputy Minister of Education, the issue came up. Does the use of English and French and Portuguese, does it limit our creativity?
Yeah.
Is that a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, Patrick, that's the question. And our ability to innovate, because English, Chinese, South Korea, Japan, they all think and innovate in their own language. We have to use another language. Is that a problem? Your view on languages?
Well, my view is that you can innovate in any language. And so I don't see that as a barrier to innovation. And, you know, Ghana is, the official language is English. And so students, by the time they're in university, are quite conversant with English. And it's not, I don't think that it is currently serving as a barrier to innovation.
Okay, all right. Okay, all right, thank you. So Professor Boateng.
Good afternoon, all protocols observed. Mr. Wu, congratulations on your initiative. I've been following closely, and I'm glad that you've introduced supply chain management at your institution. But one thing I want to find out is the issue of tertiary education, curriculum delivery, post-COVID. What are some of the steps that you've taken in terms of possibly delivering to your students? Because you know, tertiary education has changed forever because of COVID.
Okay, so with COVID, you know, our campuses are closed for public health reasons, and we anticipated that this would happen, and so we were ready to switch online. And you know, what we're doing with online education, we have a learning management system that we'd already been using on campus. So faculty can post course material, videos and so on for students to access whenever they want. We've been using Zoom more on the business side of the university for meetings and conferences and so on. And so we switched to Zoom for online classes. And then for some of the science-based courses, they're using virtual labs to do the laboratory work using simulations on computers. So we've pretty much switched to virtual while the COVID pandemic is underway. Now, we will always continue to use technology even when COVID is over and we're back to campus. These systems will still be in use. The things that we had to do for our context is that, you know, there are really three groups of students that we consider as we think about online learning. So there's a group that has access to internet at home. They can afford data, the data rates, they have laptops and so on. There's a group that live in areas that have access to data, but they may not have sufficient funding themselves to pay for data in significant amounts. They may not even have laptops. And there's a group that live in areas where they don't have access to 4G networks or above. So they, you know, they're in a remote village or someplace like this where they just can't even get access at all. So for online learning, what we've done is that those students who can connect data but who couldn't afford to, the university bought them data bundles. We buy data bundles for them every month. For those who needed laptops, we loan them laptops so they can get connected. And all the online courses are recorded so that students who are not able to connect synchronously can later on get access to that course material. And then for those who don't have access at all to connectivity, we're committing to them that when campus reopens, they will be able to complete their academic work on campus. So all these things that we're doing now will be available. They'll be able to complete this semester. And the only difference is that they may graduate later than their peers.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I will get your details from Ambassador Edward, and then I'll make contact on the supply chain.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Thank you.
So Gloria, you can continue with the questions from the student side. If you can get more questions from the students.
Okay, thank you, Your Excellency. So I would like to ask another question. In May last year, there was an article that was posted, I think, in the Ghanaian Times, and currently it's also on the Ghana web, that after the results of the February and March GMDC license exams were released, 157 out of 225 students passed. And it was also revealed that it had been the trend for the past 19 years. So basically, more than 50% of the medical students that come back home to write the GMDC license exam failed the exam. So in your opinion as an educator, what seems to be the problem, and what advice can you give to us as students to help change this narrative? Basically, why do Ghanaian professors make passing with good grades so difficult, in a sense?
Well, I don't really fully understand what's going on. It seems to me that if somebody has managed to pass medical exams in Europe or North America or Asia, and they come to Ghana, since they've already passed there, I would expect that the chances of passing in Ghana would be very high, certainly greater than 50%. Now, having said that, I think that part of the problem, if I had to guess, may be that the Ghanaian exams are looking for something different than what the other exams look for, in which case we need to question whether the Ghanaian exams are looking for the right things, because it's not at all clear to me that the Ghanaian medical system somehow is better or stronger than other regions of the world. And if people are passing in accredited institutions globally, but are not passing here, we should look at what we're measuring. It is possible that the Ghanaian exam, one of the things that I've noticed about the nature of exams here is that they're very concerned with rote memorization of facts. So if somebody has passed a medical exam, say from the United States, which is not as concerned with the memorization of facts, that person might have some difficulty here because so that's one thing. The second thing that may be at issue is that it's possible, and I'm just speculating here, I don't really know, but it is possible that the Ghanaian exam is looking more at tropical diseases or diseases that are more prevalent here than what other medical systems are looking at. And so students who are returning here should sort of make sure that they're getting up to speed on the kinds of medical issues that are more prevalent in Ghana before they take the exam here. The other advice I would give to students here is that it's always a good idea to try and find out what previous exams have looked like in Ghana. So if you have past exam questions that you can review, that will give you a sense of what the exam looks like here so that you can prepare yourself better for taking the exam here.
Thank you very much. My next question, and this will be the last one before we open the floor for our audience to come in, is why do you think many diligent Ghanaian students still want to travel abroad to further their education, despite the efforts offered by universities like Ashesi and other universities back home? Because many of such students end up remaining in the diaspora instead of returning home. And how can this problem be resolved, seeing as we are losing a lot of brain power? And also, what do you think is the biggest challenge in the Ghanaian education sector now? Do you think the students are coming out equipped with the skills they would need to make them innovative, nation builders, and competitive to meet the challenges required to change our country and continent?
All right, so these are both difficult questions, Gloria. I think that people who leave for education elsewhere are doing so for a variety of reasons. So there are people who are leaving because, frankly, they're looking for greener pastures. They see that, well, if you have, if you have the opportunity to go and get an education in the United States or in Europe and get a job there, you're going to be higher, you're going to earn more. And so they're going for that. There are people who are going because they feel that the educational experience is a higher quality elsewhere than here. And then there are people who are going because they just want, it's out of curiosity, they want to experience another culture as part of their overall development. Now, the way that we are trying to address these issues, and I think that the way that Ghanaian institutions can help address these issues is, first of all, we work very hard to make sure that the education that we give here at Ashesi is comparable. It's a close approximation of what you would get from any of the best universities offering undergraduate education. So that you know that if you come to Ashesi, you're going to get the same quality. The student exchange program that we have is a way of saying, look, you can study in Ghana and still have that intercultural experience that you're looking for. And so if we do that combination of things, of making sure the quality is there and there's that intercultural opportunity, then we solve a significant part of the reasons why people are leaving. Now, the people who want to go because they just want to be in New York versus be in Accra, well, we're operating near Accra. So, so that's just a matter of, as Ghana's economy improves, as economies in Africa improve, that more and more people want to stay. And in fact, people want to come here to do their education and to work here. Now, remind me your second question again.
Okay, the second question was what you think the biggest challenge in Ghana's education sector is now, and whether you think students are being equipped with the skills they need to make them innovative, nation builders, and competitive to meet the challenges required to change our country and continent.
Well, I would say that the two biggest things that the educational system in Ghana should be focusing on improving are making sure that we're educating people who are problem solvers, who have strong practical skills, and making sure that the educational system is putting a very heavy emphasis on ethics and work ethic. So maybe I'll explain a little bit what I mean by that. It's very important that people have a strong work ethic. So people have this idea that, you know, when you go to work, you're there to actually produce a result, and every day counts at work. It's not, you don't go to work and then coast or do nothing for 3 months and then take a final exam at the end of 3 months. When you go to work, every day counts. And so the educational system should really lean towards continuous assessment and so teaching students that every day counts before they get out into the world of work. And it is also very important that people have so this ethical bearing deep inside of them, because they're going to be put in positions of responsibility. Their ability to execute, to get investment money and all of these things depend on how much people trust them and how trustworthy they are. And then with problem solving is a combination of many things. It's the ability to analyze a situation, break it apart into its constituent parts and solve the problem. It's about creativity. It's about curiosity. It's about being a willingness to learn from others, a willingness to question and listen deeply to what other people are telling you. There's lots of things that go into the ability to be a problem solver. And so we need to really add all of those to what we measure, what we teach and measure in the educational system.
Oh, thank you so much. I'd like to call Honorable Nikwe to mitigate the questions from the audience.
All right. Thank you very much, Honorable Gloria. We would like everyone to please write your real name and probably your chapter against your name so we can recognize you and call you. And then please raise your hand also so we can call you for a question. So, and please make your question very snappy because we're against time now. So let's quickly go with Musa from Wuhan. Very brief, please.
Honorable Veeb, if you could help us with unmuting the people whose hands are raised so that they can ask their question.
Okay, Honorable Musa can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I thank you for this opportunity. Sincere regards and appreciation to His Excellency Ambassador Boateng for this great opportunity, and also thanks to Dr. Patrick Gyimah. My question is, in Ghana has had a number of educational reforms, especially if you look at the senior high school sector, or if you like the secondary educational sector, 1987, 2007, and I think there is also recent educational reforms. I want Dr. Patrick Gyimah to I want to get his views on how we go about educational reforms. It looks like our educational reforms are not centered on a national plan. It looks like it is more of partisan nature than what we really need to do as we really need to have as a roadmap for the country. I want his views on that.
Okay. May I suggest that we just take a number of questions together before I answer them? So we take 3 questions, then I'll answer them all at once.
Okay, thank you very much. Perry from Xi'an, can you also add your question very quick? Honorable Perry from Xi'an.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me, please?
Yeah, yes. Chairman. Yeah.
Great. My name is Perry. I'm the president for the Chairman chapter of NUGS. I'm an international law PhD student. I want to be a professor someday, and I don't just want to produce students of any caliber. What would be your advice to me in producing excellent students who can make a difference, as you would put it, critical thinkers, being able to influence society and all? And also, what is the criteria for picking lecturers in Ashesi University? What do you look out for when you are taking someone to be a lecturer in Ashesi University? Hope my question was clear, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, if we add one more, I heard we have a representative from NUGS Brazil. If he's on NUGS Brazil, please open your microphone and go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Jeanette Salis. I'm the president of NUGS Brazil. I was having accompanying the meeting. Battery is 3%, so I need to have make a quick question. And yes, so to Mr. Wang, I would like to know that is there any way our educational system can be improved, like how to get our people to pursue higher education? Like what do you think? How do we have some kind of motivations? Like how do we get, because we normally see that when we get to certain level, especially for women, the society expects something different from us. Like, oh, you get married, have children and all that. And I don't know, like I wanted to know if there is anything like we could do to motivate, like to help people to pursue higher education. And my second question is how would you get, like you are an entrepreneur and an educator, so how is this, how do you combine the two? Like how would you motivate us to get to this area? What I mean, like you're a CEO and an educator, so I would like to know how do we get there too? Yeah, that's my question.
Okay, so I think I'll take these questions. So educational reforms, the first question from Musa about educational reforms not seeming to be centered on a plan, but rather partisan politics, and how do we change that? You know, first of all, I think that you've got to understand that, you know, democracy is what it is. People run for office and they make promises to the people who voted for them, and they try to, you know, meet their obligations or their promises to the people. And that may come across as partisan, but to a certain extent, you are going to have politicians responding to the people who voted for them as part of a democracy. And that's fine. I think the bigger issue with education is, you know, it is no different for people. You have to give them the resources that are needed for them to get their job done. And you have to somehow get them all aligned behind a vision of what you're trying to accomplish. And that is the challenge for the leadership of the country, is a challenge for the leadership of the educational, of the Ministry of Education and the Ghana Education Service. So make sure that teachers and school administrators are highly qualified and committed to the job that they're doing, and they're inspired to achieve the vision that you've set out for them. And I think to a certain degree, that's the most important thing. Now, Perry asked about what it takes to be a good professor who prepares students who are excellent. I think that, and specifically wanted to know, how does Ashesi make the choice about who we hire to be a professor? when we're making hiring decisions for the faculty, we really look at what their teaching philosophy is. We look at what their research and scholarly interests are. So we want to hire people who are curious. We want to hire people who really have a heart for students and who will listen to students and be patient with students, who are knowledgeable about their area of study. So if you're an engineer or a computer scientist or a business person, do you really know your own discipline well? And how do you share that your knowledge with others? And how do you, more importantly, guide students to be able to learn for themselves as well? And then there was a question about how do we motivate people to pursue higher education, especially women, where sometimes society expects them to go get married rather than go to further education. You know, in our experience at Ishesi, actually a lot of families want their kids to go on to higher education, whether they're men or women. We've encountered a few situations where families want their children to go to work, to get into the world of work, rather than go to universities. And this tends to happen in families that are economically disadvantaged. They want both their sons and their daughters after high school to start earning income right away. And for those families, I think that our scholarship program has been very important for convincing them to let their children want to go to college. I should say that in those situations that we've encountered, the students themselves very much wanted to go to college. And so that was half the battle. But providing some financial support for students who come from very economically disadvantaged families is very important. In some cases, we even give stipends to some of these students, and we know that these students are sending some of their stipends home to their families. And you know, it's an investment that we have to convince them to make for 4 years. And then after 4 years, those families that have allowed their students to come then see a very high return once their children have a bachelor's degree and get a high-paying job. And the final question was about educational entrepreneurship. So you're an educator, but you want to start your own organization. I can only share what I did. For me, I went to business school. I went to learn how a business functions. I wanted to learn about finance, accounting, you know, marketing, public policy. You know, when you're running an organization, human resources and organizational behavior, these are all very important. And so to the extent that you can learn about how to run an enterprise, that is very important. It is also very important to have a co-founder. Don't try to do it alone. So get other people who are working with you. Okay, so I'll stop there so we can take a few more questions.
Thank you very much. I am hoping Your Excellency doesn't come in to say time is up, because you're a very resourceful person. I will want to have a few extra minutes of time to ask a few questions, because there is this basic and fundamental question that the top is now okay at tertiary levels. We have people like you who are making structures in place to have it better. But at basic level, the SHS is now being taken into the political terrain. Today it's 4 years. The next moment is 3 years. We don't know the syllabus and other things. Is there not time that in this era where we have people like you who can structure a tertiary system that is working and is known worldwide, to come together, all the tertiary institutions come together, and then we take these basic level come up with a structure that is favorable for all, because at the end of the day, all these basic level students end up at the university at your place. So you take it out of politics, make it an independent body that supervises the educational level right from the primary, secondary school, come up with a syllabus that is adequate, that is recognized worldwide, because of the political interference. Some countries are weighing the option of taking the SHS students. So can you come up with something for us, an independent body handling the basic level, secondary level, right up to the universities?
Well, I would say that the various governments have in fact consulted from time to time with people in higher ed, as well as in the high school and the basic education sectors for advice on how they set policy. So, but the thing is, there's many different viewpoints of what to do across the board. And so, you know, I just want to assure you that it's not as if politicians just sit down and make these decisions by themselves. They are, in fact, seeking advice. From what I have observed, they are, in fact, seeking advice from a lot of people in setting their policy. You know, hopefully all of this is going to end up in a better outcome for our students. I think that I tend to be optimistic that in the long run, we're going to get it right. And that people like me and others in leadership in higher ed, leadership in the primary educational system and the high school educational system should continue to offer advice, and that in the long run, things will be okay.
Okay, we are picking questions from the floor. We'll allow Honorable Nana, NUGS Vice President, to come up with a question, and then Honorable Michael, you follow up with your question. So Honorable Nana.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Patrick. I would like to go back to what you said earlier concerning the startup. We have a lot of entrepreneurs among us, and you started at the age of 37. It means it's not too late for some of us. Yeah, so in the process, whereby you had financial issues and you intended to change the policy on fundraising, and at that point in time, 7 people came out to support. I want to know, most of the entrepreneurs, when we get at such point, we break down and we can't move on again. So I want to know what was really on the table, what motivated those people to come on board to support at that point in time. That's my first question. And my second question is that what motivated you to choose that venue, Accra, as the center? What was the motive? What was the idea? Because most importantly, entrepreneurs, when we are coming on board, we think about finances, we think about location. What brought up the idea, and then why that location? Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, so the question was, what motivated the 7 people that eventually stepped in to support when we were having financial difficulties? I would say that there are 2 main things. One was that they liked Ashesi's mission and the vision of what we were trying to achieve. We had been running for a couple of years, so they could begin to see whether we were actually doing a good job or not, and they were happy with the progress that we were making on the academic side. And then the third one was, these were all people who trusted me personally. These are people who knew me, that worked with me, or they were close friends with people who had worked with me at Microsoft. And so it was just that trust and goodwill that I had built at the company that was a factor in that support. Why did we choose Accra as the location for Ashesi? It's very simple. You know, as I said, we did a feasibility study. We went around the country to ask, to survey students, parents, corporate Ghana. And one of the questions we asked was, where should we establish this new university? And 95% of respondents said it needed to be in or near Accra. And that included people that we surveyed, say in Kumasi or Cape Coast and other places. Everyone said, look, Accra is where you need to base it. And so we followed that advice.
Thank you very much. Okay, for the sake of time, I think we have to allow other members to come in.
We'll call Honorable Michael. Honorable Michael, if you can come in, and then Honorable Derek Kujo, get ready to follow up.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much, NUGS-CHINA. Thank you, Honorable Edward, and thank you, Dr. Wua, for your presentation. Please, concerning the education, there was this article that I think it surfaces on I think Ghana Web about a proposed university bill, which it's like giving the sole mandate to the government to appoint like the VCs, pro VCs of a university. And from your point of view, I don't you think if the government comes in to do or to take a sole ownership of appointing members of the university in a high ranking position, is it not going to jeopardize everything that a university stands for? Simply because why am I asking this? Because of a similar situation that happened at University of Education before. That was, I think it was between the former Pro VC, Professor Avoke, and then the current Pro VC, which they asked the former Pro VC to step aside for Iyoko to look.
Yeah, so I think I can answer the question without getting into the details about Winneba. I haven't really followed the Public Universities Bill closely. So I can't really comment on it, and I don't know what, I just know that generally the government is seeking to have, you know, there are many different bills. Every public university has a law for itself. And I think I've heard the Minister of Education say that the government wanted to have one law that applies to all universities so that they have a standard set of regulations for all the universities rather than have slightly different regulations for Legon, KNUST, University of Education, and so on. And also that the government is going to be appointing some of the members on the university councils. So that's about as much as I know about the bill. I haven't read it in detail. I wasn't familiar with what you said about the government appointing the vice chancellor and so on. So I don't want to comment on those things.
Okay, please, in the order was Michael and Ms. Lee. So Ms. Lee, if you can ask your question now. Ms. Lee?
Okay, and before she comes, honorable members, because of time, we cannot be taking a lot of questions. So those people who have raised their hands already, let's keep them. If possible, we can allow all of them, then we can go by that. So let's keep their number just like that. Thank you.
Hello.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Edward. Please, my question is, sorry, my name is Lady Ostafo, studying Educational Economics and Management, PhD. Here in China, they have project 211, where they have selected 100 universities to build it to the 21st century level. And out of the 100, they have also selected 39 to build it higher. I want to know if you can help our government to have something like that in Ghana, where we can upgrade our university to the world level. Thank you.
Okay, so I do think that it's a good idea for any country to have very strong universities and sort of have an understanding that not all universities are going to be equally strong. So if you go to the UK, there's Cambridge and Oxford and others. The US, you'll have Harvard and Stanford and others. And certainly that's going to happen here. My sense that is in Ghana that a lot of resources go to University of Ghana and KNUST and UCC. I would say that it'd probably be good for the government to set up a research fund that universities can apply, and then based on the merit of the idea of what they're applying, of the application, they get the funding to pursue that kind of research. And that's one way of having a sort of a meritocratic approach to making sure that the best ideas get funded to move forward.
Okay, I would like to come in here. This is Ambassador. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, our 2 hours is up and we have to end. For those of you who have not been able to ask your questions, please send your questions to the NUGS Secretariat and we'll pass it on to Dr. Patrick Gyimah for him to answer. On behalf of my colleague ambassadors, the students, I would like to thank Dr. Gyimah very much for this very insightful and invaluable information sharing session. Before we sign off, I would like to have your final remarks, Patrick, and your advice to the students here in China. I believe that presently we have one of the highest number of Ghanaian students overseas in China. We have about 6,750 students studying here, out of which 2/3 of them are master's and PhD students in different disciplines. So your final advice and also your view of what the world is going to be like post-COVID and what students should be doing, because they should be the next Patrick Gyimah. So your final words.
Right.
Also, finally, before you finish, my colleague ambassador from Tanzania would like to invite you. He's been very impressed with you, and he says it's been time worth spending with you this evening. So he would like to invite you. So I'll pass your number on to him and he'll be giving you a call.
Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate the time that you've all spent with me. I'm very impressed by the turnout, and I'm very impressed with the number of Ghanaian students in China. So my advice to students studying in China is, well, the obvious one is take your studies very seriously, but also spend some time really understanding the culture of China, understanding what the interests of China are, and building your network in China, so that when you return to Ghana, that network that you've built in China will be important, actually will be an important contribution that you make to Ghana by bringing that network with you to Ghana. And that's what I've done. The network that I built in the United States, I made sure to bring them along with me when I was returning home to not only assist with my project, but also to find ways that are sort of mutually beneficial to the two societies. And so when you return, you will be at the forefront of being able to help Ghana make the right deals and the right win-win transactions with China. You'll be in a position to bring your network. So if you're, for example, coming back to be a professor, being able to continue to do joint research with your colleagues from China, all of those things are things that you can offer to this country that people who have not come to China cannot offer to this country. People who've gone to other parts of the world will offer that. People who've stayed in Ghana also offer what they know about Ghana and how to operate here. But this is the unique thing that you have, that understanding of China, the networks that you build in China, the knowledge that you gain in China and bringing back to Ghana. And I also want to encourage you, whatever you're doing, your long-term goals should be to bring it, to come back to Ghana and to help with development here. Because in the end, what we really need to do is we need to make sure that Africa rises up to be an equal partner of all nations in the world. And that really is where I would like to end.
Okay, thank you very much. So final words from, vote of thanks from Felix.
Okay, thank you very much, HE. Thank you very much, Dr. Patrick. Permission to call Dr. Kofo to say something small, and then the vote of thanks will come. Thank you. Dr. Kofo.
Please, you can unmute. Let me try and unmute him. I think his mic is muted. Please, can someone help me unmute his mic?
The next thing. Is our new colleague will come.
Great, thank you very much. Sorry, my mic was muted and I couldn't unmute it. Yeah, thanks for giving me a couple of minutes to say a word. I have to. We have heard several times about. Hello.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, Dr. Iwa, I have to say that we've heard several times how impressive your achievement is, but it's still irresistible for me to add my voice. I'm speaking from the point of view as an academic, and well, I'm an economics lecturer at the University of Nottingham. And I have to say that your achievement is incredibly impressive. You're a great asset to Ghana and to Africa as a whole, and I'm extremely impressed. Actually, I wanted to ask a few questions, but I didn't have enough time. There wasn't enough time to do that. But I would want to bring this to your attention that, I was very happy when I heard about your interest in accreditation, or let me say recognition in Africa, and globally. As a lecturer from the University of Ghana, one note that I'll leave you with is the fact that, sometimes when we are going through admission process, I have had to, drop in a word or two about Ashesi University because, well, fortunately I have colleagues there and I know what Ashesi has been all about. But when it comes to, the list of recognized institutions in Ghana, we don't find Ashesi University there. I know Ashesi is recognized in Ghana. I know it is accredited in Ghana, but at the moment, when it comes to the private universities, we have Central University, Trinity, we have Valley View, and one Acrofic Cristalla. And this is something I just want to draw your attention to, that for the sake of your graduates who seek to further their studies abroad, it's important to work towards this accreditation. So that's just a note to leave you with. But besides that, I don't think, since there is not enough time, I wouldn't want to get into other issues that I wanted to bring up. But congratulations once again on your achievement. And Honorable Edwards, congratulations and thanks very much for how much time you've given to the students we have here. Throughout the COVID-19, I was reading some of your circulars and all that. You seem to be very active with our students we have here. And I think that's the best asset you can actually build at this point in time, and the best that you can leave behind. So we appreciate you. You're doing a great deal of work with our students here in China, and we urge you on. You have our backing in this. So anytime you want to call on us, please feel free to do so. We'll be very happy to support you in reaching out to the students.
Thank you very much. Honorable Gloria.
Fama? Okay, in her absence, we'll call on Chris to give the vote of thanks. Chris from Beijing. Okay, Ben Carson, please give the vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gloria. Thank you very much, Mr. Patrick Gyimah, for giving us this time to speak about how you are helping to transform Ghana's education system and how we can also be beneficial to our country. I would like to extend the next gratitude to our honorable guest, our high commissioners, I would say, the ambassadors that join us, His Excellency Edward Boateng, and his colleague ambassadors from other African nations that join us today. It's a blessing to have you all here. I hope you also grant your students in the diaspora the opportunity to also hear him speak. We will also extend gratitude to Dr. Kufuor for also coming, Professor Boateng also for joining us today. And the next appreciation goes to the NUGS executives, our fellow executives from Brazil and other countries that also join us, and then the whole student body that didn't disappoint, also participated. It shows that you have the heart to actually transform our education system. Thank you all for coming, and please enjoy your night.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure to participate, and I want to thank Ambassador Boateng for inviting me, and also for the great work that you're doing for our students in China. I also follow very closely the work that you're doing as a COVID-19 pandemic was starting in China. And on behalf of all of us here in Ghana, thank you for the work that you're doing.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. I think the last word will go to my colleague from Tanzania who want to share some initial thoughts about the students networking. That's what he picked up, Patrick's last statement, that we need to network. You have to take it more.
Well, I was recommending to my colleague Edward that we should have a continental forum like this one, which will involve representatives from all African countries who are studying in China, so that we expand this network. This is the idea I am throwing out to you students. Let's do this.
Okay, all right. So thank you very much, Patrick, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Okay, thank you, and good night.
Okay, good night. Bye.